to meet that expectation. There has been a very traditional role that we've seen over a period of time, control, compliance, policy, adherence, and so forth. When we talk of, as Avdesh was alluding to, self-management, a lot of these things become administrative redundancies. Now we reach a stage, how do we progressively support an organization to grow further, which is the big question that needs to be answered. A couple of areas that interest me personally in this entire search are areas concerning around managing a complex contingent workforce as we go forward, and we can talk a little more about that. Analytics and how we leverage that in HR, which is suboptimal at this stage, and learning design, which is so very different from what it used to be even a decade ago. So those two or three things maybe we can touch upon as we move forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to enlighten us with the areas Gaurav and Avadesh and others. When I look at this HR trends or what is happening new, as rightly mentioned by Gaurav, yes, 1990s to 2000 early, if you read something and if you today correlate to that, you will find it's almost same. Nothing has much changed because it is totally evolving. What is actually happening, in fact, if you see today, change is constant, we all know. But today's world, change is happening very rapidly. So today, overnight, you find a company being sold. Overnight, you find in the place that someone has been taken over by someone. So it's a situation where you can't predict. Technically, if you see today the growth of e-commerce, today this technological businesses, the life cycles, the product life cycles for even FMCG or a consumer product has shortened out to few months or few years. Mobile technology is one of them. Every day you find a new technology, a new product being launched. So the area of concern, or rather what is changing of, is that how HR can be a part of this business, how HR can be a central focal point, because today it's not even a war of getting people or a talent acquisition, it is also about managing and nurturing the talent which you have. So the biggest challenge is that can HR be a part of the main focal of the business? Can HR contribute? Can HR understand the business criticality? Can HR help in changing and adapting to that need of the organization is something which has to be looked upon. While I say that, yes, the other side of the story is HR means human resource, and human resource means people, and that has to be also take on a larger gamut of thinking. So while you see that, then there comes that how, if the change is so constant and inevitable, how do the learning happens in organizations, and how HR can play a central point of this learning. Because today you may lose a good programmer to a company or a good salesperson to a competition, but today if you have set processes and systems, or if you have a culture being developed to organization, people come to only enjoy working with you, not only about only that, okay, the compensation makes a difference. The people also enjoy working in that environment. So can we create that environment? Can that environment, sustainability be created so that people not only come here to just work for money, they also get a learning curve. They also know, okay, if I am a person who is into the incubation of this project, is that me who is going to take it up to the next level and ensure that that is a part of the organization strategy. So I think HR's role has now become, from the typical psychological contract, it is moving towards a social contract, where you give people the empowerment, you give them the freedom to taste, never mind if they fail also, but how you record that experience within the system and develop similar businesses across geographies, across products, where HR becomes a very important part of the role, not only as a support function, but also as an enabler to ensure that the business succeed. So this is something which is also evolving, and I think that's something which we will also look at in the other discussions we are having now.
Thanks. There was a question as I was hearing all of them, and I'm going back from HR back to business. And I thought I'll pick up an example. How many of you are carrying a mobile phone here? All of us. Uh, are you carrying a mobile phone which has been made by more than one company? How many of you are carrying a mobile phone, only one, made by more than one company? All of us are. Because no mobile phone in entirety is made by any company, right? And forget about the hardware, the software is complete. All your apps are made by different people. So, and this is not just high-end technology. If I go to brick and mortar organizations, if I go to retail, it is no longer one company. If that be the case, we are talking about not acquiring talent, we are talking about accessing talent. At a business level, we are talking about partnerships rather than companies. So is that something that you experience in your business domains? Is that something that you see your business might have to get into?
So that's very interesting actually. See, as I said earlier, that the boundaries of the workplace are getting redefined. And when I say the boundaries of workplace are getting redefined, my humble submission is that, the work is actually not getting executed from the office premises anymore. And since the work is not getting executed from office premises, it adds to a lot of complexity. And you are right, you acquire talent inside the organization, but not all talent you acquire. You access a lot of talent which may or may not be part of your organization. For example, you get consultants to come on board, you go out and look at self-managed contracts, as I was referring to. Self-managed contract is nothing but a person deciding that I want to be a company on my own, and I would offer my services rather than individual. I would offer my services as a company. So when you look at consulting organizations, when you look at self-managed contract, the part-time workers, the contingent workforce, which is not part of your organization, then this whole question of talent acquisition becomes a little wider, because you're not acquiring talent, you are actually accessing talent. And you need to have ability to access this talent in piecemeal basis. You need to have work system design which addresses that. You need to have HR capability which can access that talent. And this is not only capability of the contract design, but it is also the capability of how are you going and redesign your IT systems, your work systems, so that that talent can be accessed. So I would, Gaurav, I agree that, going forward, what you will see is that I think 50 to 60% of your work will get executed by talent which probably will not be acquired, but is going to sit outside the organization. And that's the trend I see already. And I think the HR professionals sitting in this room have to gear up to meet that kind of a challenge from a contract perspective, from culture building perspective. Look at culture. I've got 2,500 people in my company, and I've got 10,000 people who are outside the company. I've got another 50 people who are consultants. I've got some people who are working part-time. Now, what kind of culture can you build in this kind of a situation? Is culture going to be all pervasive? And by the way, these 10,000 people that I'm talking about, they create moment of truth for our customers. These are not the people who are, doing some less important work. They are engaging with my customers on a daily basis, and I expect them to pass on the employer experience to them. And if the employer experience and the cultural values that the organization represents is not getting displayed at the moment of truth when the customer is being acquired, you have lost out on this single unified culture that you want to build. I would personally believe that this is going to be one of the biggest challenges that HR teams will face when you have a very distributed workforce which is not inside the organization. How do you build unified culture, and how do you pass on cultural values to people who actually do not even belong to you? So very interesting times in terms of some of these dimensions, I would say.
It's such an interesting question. It's always a challenge to speak after Avdesh on such questions. You've covered such interesting facets and gamuts of this subject. Imagine for a moment, I'm asking you to imagine you're running a company, okay? And there is a task that you're supposed to do. It's
let's say, the task of getting data scientists to churn out an algorithm which will give you the degree of predictive analysis for the work that you do. And you have a site where you can literally go and auction that task. Work template, 5 days. Output expected, X. Now you have a set of fairly qualified people who are electronically bidding for that particular job. And somebody will get that job and eventually run with it. So the site's of course called Kaggle.com, and there's a whole lot of such work that's happening. I know Freelancer is one, Elance is another one. So it's happening as we speak right now. In fact, US, probably 1/3 of the workforce, if I remember correctly, I was reading a Deloitte study some time back, is contingent. And contingent does not necessarily mean not on the rolls at that point of time. It means diverse workforce. If we, which people who are not co-located, people who don't share a same background, but they are together for that period of time in the moment to do that task, collaborate, and just go away again till the time they come back with another set of people. Crowdsourcing is a classic example used by IT companies to develop software. In fact, crowdsourcing will be the way of the future as we see it when it comes to managing some of this work. So I'll leave it for my other panelists to kind of share more inputs.
Well, interestingly, and as we are talking, we are discovering that perhaps, we are facing the same challenge. What I can say is, having largely worked in consulting firms, which predominantly do not keep a bench strength as maybe an IT firm or a BPO firm or a services firm would do, the challenge is always, where your next project is going to come from, what skill set would you need, and how quickly can you get people on board. And then you cannot really, go through the traditional models of hiring. I know for a fact, take an example of, where I work. I mean, almost 1/4 of our people are people with a full-time employment sort of category. Everybody else is either a contractual employee or a consultant or a full-time consultant or a part-time consultant. Somebody maybe who gives maybe 18 days a month, we say a full-time consultant. Because it's not by choice that, we have defined. It's because that available workforce, that knowledge workforce, these are people who are subject matter experts. They want to be engaged like that. You would go to I was, that example of, that you just gave, I mean, you need to say a health and sanitation expert in a place like Odisha who will go there and, study about the water levels there to advise the state government. You need somebody who understands the local topography, demographics, language, and is willing to work for you because your project is only with your client is only till for 6 months, so you need somebody only for 6 months. On the contrary, as against, the traditionally what was, you would have seen in our homes or whatever, job lag gayi, pakki naukri, all of that. I think that is going off. On the contrary, people are coming to us and say, I don't need a full-time job. I mean, you hired me as a consultant. Of course, there are, benefits like taxation and all that. Consultants pay lesser tax. It's 1/3 of full-time employees. That's an advantage. But then, how do you really manage a workforce like that, where your people are scattered all across, wherever your presence is, your projects are. And to the earlier point of things not changing in last 2 decades, they haven't and they will not, because the basic enigma about dealing with people, I mean, you can't crack it. And, we always say that, leaders are responsible to build culture, and then the culture, drives performance. So that will probably remain true for the eternity, but then the things that are pushing you to look at how you hire, and I'm specifically going to, focus about hiring, not getting into other areas,